Hi everyone, so the server slam is starting later today and I got something for you. So as you may know, in the last weeks I've been crafting quite a lot of Diablo 4 builds. So this is what I've been doing on stream actually, talking about my own builds, about my ideas, making those setups, and also other viewers coming in, sending me their builds to have me check them and we discuss and these kind of things. If you want to have your own builds checked, then feel free to stop by on the stream whenever I do that, or now during the weekend for example, and we can take a look at it together. But of course, now for the server slam, I have prepared a bunch of builds here. So we have some leveling builds here. I'm just gonna open all of these here. So I have them all on my Discord as well. So in case you just want to grab a link or something, I have my Discord server here. There's a Diablo 4 section right at the top. And here are the builds that I made. So all of these Ashava builds here and all of these 1 to 20 leveling builds are fresh post buff and nerf patch builds that I went through again and updated again, and I'm just gonna like talk you a little bit through them. They're not super complicated, they're level 20 builds, and I also made them so that you don't need to farm any legendary items, so they're all with only the codex powers. This means also that there can definitely be like way stronger setups than that. If you find some big legendaries, which I would not really count on because of the reduced drop rates now. But if you get something, of course, you can always try to build around that in some way. These are just basic setups that require absolutely nothing, and I expect to work reasonably well based on all the stuff that I've seen from last time. You might remember my video, I leveled 8 characters. I think I've played like 20 different builds during the open beta weekends. And, you know, I have a bit of an understanding of how all the classes work with basically all of the builds. So for leveling, you have 3 barb builds here: Thorns Rend, Thorns Upheaval, Thorns Whirlwind. Thorns in general is just very nice when you have nothing on the barb, so I put that in there. It's like the same synergies for most of these. We have the 3 shouts. Yeah, they got nerfed a little bit now, but they're still good enough, I think, to just like have in there. Of course, again, you can always experiment if you don't like this one particular skill or something like that. That goes for all of these builds here. You can try to adjust a little bit to your liking. But we cannot get the ultimates this time around. With level 20, you don't have enough points. So this will definitely hold back some of those classes, at least on the higher levels, if you want to, for example, do dungeons with big boss fights or something like that. Something like the Call of the Ancients was very strong, for example. The Iron Maelstrom as well. You can't get these things now. You have to do this with like basic builds, just using your core skills most of the time. But the barbs, for example, they have these assisting thorns synergies with the challenging shout. Maybe try to stack some thorns from your gems, and then stuff mostly just dies when it hits you, and you can do a bit of extra damage yourself, either with Rend or here with Upheaval. And we have the Whirlwind, which got freshly buffed, so this should actually be one of the better ones now, I think. Also keep in mind, it says level 22 here on the requirement. This is because of the renown system. You have 2 extra skill points that you get. One you're basically guaranteed to get, and yeah, maybe you get the last renown point or not. So if not, then just remove 1 point somewhere from, like, you know, worst case your main skill or some other passive that has multiple points that doesn't really do much. So you can just adjust this a little bit. Next up, we have the Druid. So we have 4 builds for the Druid for leveling. That are Tornado, Pulverize, Shred, and Lightning Storm. So everything but Landslide, basically. Druids actually got significant buffs for the early game, and especially the companions are really strong now. So in basically all of those Druid builds, I have a lot of companions now, especially Poison Creeper plus Wolves, and then sometimes the Ravens as well. So for example here on the Tornado build. So they are pretty straightforward. Storm Strike, very good basic skill. And then one of the core skills usually, so in this case the Tornado, but in other cases we know we have the Shred here if you like the Wolf, we have the Pulverize here if you like the Bear, etc. And then we have Earthen Bulwark, it's just a very nice defense. And we have companions here, so either 2 or 3 companions, depending on the exact setup. One thing I would also definitely recommend to try is Trample. Trample has been massively buffed to actually deal quite some damage now on single targets because of this enhanced trample effect that gives it 150% bonus damage against the first enemy. And this can be quite useful as well to include a bit of mobility and like a burst for free in your build. But I think that these companions are definitely gonna be hard carrying on the Druid leveling now. So this is why I went for these in basically all of these builds. Next we have the Necro. So I think Necros are just gonna be like overall solid still in the early game, with the minions just being very powerful, and then you can just do whatever you want. They did nerf the base Corpse Explosion a bit, but it didn't really touch the Miasma Corpse Explosion. So it's the one that creates this dot on the ground. This one seems to be pretty much unchanged. So you just have like this delayed kind of like damage over time effect now that you should go for, I guess, with Corpse Explosion, but it's still like a very powerful tool for extra damage. And again, usually have something like Reap or Decompose to get some corpses as a generator. And then you have like one of the core skills, especially Bone Spear. Bloodlands got heavily buffed. And I have a Sever build here, so one of these are probably the best. And then, yeah, I have stuff like Blood Mist, maybe a Bone Prison. There's actually an aspect for it that gives you the Pool of Blight from the Bone Prison, so that's like a nice synergy. Yeah, and then you just like throw in some minions there. So usually I just have like the Defender skellies here. You can also go for an offensive one if you feel like they don't die anyway. And then we have the Cold Mages that give you resources and chill. So this is kind of like the regular setup I have on most of these Necro builds here, which I think should work pretty well. And here there I swapped in like a skill, for example, Decrepify instead of Bone Prison. So that depends a little bit on the exact setup, but it should work really easily with this. Then we have the Rogue builds here, so I recommend Twisting Blades and Penetrating Shot for leveling. I think these are gonna have the best clear. Of course, you can do similar setups with basically any of the core skills if you really want to. Maybe I would not do Rapid Fire because it's mostly a single target oriented skill. It's a bit harder to really make that work well. But outside of that, I think Rogue is just solid across the board. So you can also swap this around to another skill if you want. But those builds like this. So we have usually the Fundamental Puncture for vulnerable. Then we have the core skill, so in this case Twisting Blades. They freshly nerfed the advanced Twisting Blades with the cooldown reduction. So I actually did not choose this. And we have the Daze instead, which is a very powerful effect. It just makes everything super safe as long as you attack different targets most of the time. So you can just walk into a pack, Daze, you know, the big guys, and they won't attack you. So it's very safe. And then we always have like some mobility like Dash, maybe Shadow Step 2. Then the Dark Shroud got freshly buffed with the movement speed, which is very cool. And still, most of the time you have the Shadow Imbuement despite the longer cooldown now. It's like 13 seconds. So you can't use it as often anymore, but it should still be pretty good. Penetrating Shot build works pretty similarly, but here, for example, instead of Shadow Step, you can also go with something like Concealment. So you can get either a guaranteed crit, you get extra movement speed, you get extra energy, and they actually reduce the cooldown to 10 seconds for Concealment, so that's very good. And if you need Vulnerable, you can also get the Subverting Concealment. So this is definitely something to look out for the Rogue builds. 6 seconds Vulnerable is no joke, especially when this thing only has a 10 seconds cooldown. If you want to be more single target oriented with your builds, you can also go with the Poison Imbuement instead of the Shadow Imbuement. So it's basically this or that in most cases. Or sometimes you can also do both, so that's also an option. For example, for a Flurry build or so, you wouldn't really need like maybe the Concealment. You can just drop this and get a Poison Imbuement in there. So you can play around with those options. And lastly, here we have the Sorc. So I made one for each of the different elements. So we have Arc Lash plus Hydra, Ice Shards plus Hydra, and Fireball plus Hydra. Yeah, Hydra got nerfed and all, but Hydra is still a ridiculously good skill, so it's just in there anyway. This is just how good it was and how good it still is. It's just like, it's just strong to use. So this is how these Sorc builds look now. So we have, for example, here Arc Lash. Arc Lash is very powerful, just like left click build, very chill. If you want to level with that, it's very good. We have a bit of Chain Lightning there. You could also go Charge Bolts, which got freshly buffed if you don't want to. So that's up to you. And then usually we have Teleport, Ice Armor, Frost Nova, and then the Hydra down here. And like at one point in the 90 elements, which is just like some nice defense. So Fireball build works a bit similar. We have Fireball here, Fireball Enchant. And you just have like a really good AoE clear with this build. And again, the Hydra that helps you out on a single target. And here's the Ice Shards. So if you are a cold enjoyer, then you can also do that with a bit more freeze included here. And you have the automatic Ice Shards just like, you know, pumping out damage. And there's also the aspect for it that actually buffs Ice Shards, which is a very good combo. Obviously, there are more builds possible than that. There are more skills on all of the classes that you could use. In the end, it is always up to you. And again, what I mentioned is that you can always just play around whatever you find. These are all designed to work just from scratch, basically. So just take any of them and you should have a pretty good time. I try to make them like as smooth as possible, with including both offense and defense. And then we have the Ashava builds. So they're usually relatively similar, but for example, in some cases we use different skills. So for example, here we have Barbarian, we have Upheaval and Double Swing. So when we open these Ashava builds here, I'm going to show them. They are usually a bit more single target heavy. So this is one example here from the Barbarian. I, for example, removed all the 4 and stuff, and we also have maybe a bit of some group synergies. For example, here we have the Booming Voice, Raid Leader, so you can heal everyone, you can buff everyone a bit better. So barbs are going to be like really nice on Ashava as long as you survive. In general, that's like really the one crucial step you have to try to survive. I've already made my Ashava Made Easy video talking about the different attacks that Ashava does, how to dodge them, how to survive them. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out. It's not going to be all too easy to survive, but especially with party buffs and with some defenses that I have built into these builds, you should be okay for the most part, as long as you're careful. So here in the case of Barbarian, I think that Upheaval and Double Swing are going to be the best options. Again, they're like pretty similar builds. You have like the triple shout, and then we have like, you know, basically more single target. And similar for the other builds. Here we have Druid with Tornado and Polarize, which I think are going to be like the 2 best for Ashava. So Ashava is just very large. It's very easy to hit them with the Tornado. And again, we have like the Wolves, the Poison Creeper. We have Envenom, which I assume will work for party members. So when they are poisoned, they take 30% more crit damage. So that's like a very strong buff that you can bring to everyone when you are playing a Druid. And you can also, for example, bring something like Debilitating Roar to just make Ashava deal basically no damage whenever this is up. So this is very powerful. Druids are going to be like a very good character to play for Ashava, at least for groups. Then we have the Necromancer. I think Bone Spear is going to be one of the best options here. You have Perma Vulnerable, so everyone is buffed. You can bring your minions. You can try to produce some corpses here to actually keep your minions alive. And you have Blood Mist to actually stay alive yourself. If you want another option, here's the Sever build. It's a bit more tanky because it has damage reduction built in, and you have to be in a melee range. And you can also produce corpses while attacking all the time. You don't have to go out of your way for that, for Decompose, for example. Or Bloodlands. Bloodlands got heavily buffed, and I think this is also going to be very nice. You just stand there and spam Bloodlands, Bloodlands, Bloodlands. Going to be pretty smooth and easy. Then we have Rogue, again, Twisting Blades. This is very similar to the other build that you saw earlier with the leveling, just we have the concealment this time for the vulnerable and no shadow imbuement, which is pretty useless for single targets. So you can do that. You could also still get in poison imbuement. For example, you can drop the shadow step or so, but I think the extra mobility is still very useful. And here's the rapid fire, which actually does have this poison imbuement and even less damage for Ashava again. So this should help out the entire party. And lastly, we have the 2 sorcerer options. So we have the lightning build here. This is a charged bolts build with firebolt and hydra and lots of defenses. So you can see this here. Flame shield, teleport, and ice armor. You should have no trouble with that, I think. Charged bolts also gives 20% damage reduction. Should have pretty decent single target damage. And then you proc your firebolt burn all the time while attacking with any of your stuff. That should lead to relatively good damage. And lastly, here is the Fire Sorc build. So again, this is Fire Base. We have Hydra in there, and we have Fire Wall. I think Fire Wall is going to be very strong for Ashava as well. And you can have Fire Bolt whenever your mana is out, the same defenses, and then you just spam Fireball as much as possible when Ashava is standing still. It actually burns for a lot of damage. And then you can sometimes spawn more Firewalls. So this is the overview of all the builds, both the Leveling and Ashava. I didn't really like try to rank the builds between each other in the same class, for example. Like, I'm not 100% sure if, you know, Lightning Storm is going to be a better leveling build than Tornado. You know, that might depend on the items you find and on your playstyle a little bit. But in general, I think that all of these should work relatively smoothly. If you're looking for a class recommendation, if you want to play like the Ultima OP class for low levels, I guess that is probably Rogue with Twisting Blades. So I think this is going to be like one of the smoothest one for leveling and Ashava at the same time. Also, this Arclash Sorcerer build should be really nice. They didn't actually nerf Arclash, which was very powerful before. So I think this should go very well. And then probably Necromancer with either any of those skills, basically. Like Necromancers get carried pretty hard by their minions. So I think they're also going to be nice. Yeah, Barb, yeah, it's probably still a relatively slow in the early game, but the Thorns do carry once they pick up. And Druid should be just like all around solid now, especially once you get the companions going. And this is it for this video. I'm excited for the server slam. Hope you are too. I'm going to be blasting basically all weekend long. I'm going to try to solo Ashava, of course. So this is the secret solo Ashava build here that I made, which is like, you know, fully set up with legendaries that I hope to find. So in case you are wondering what I'm trying to use for my solo Ashava kill, it will be this. Poison Imbuement, Poison Trap, yeah, Twisting Blades, of course. And we're going to be pumping with this. So it should still be possible to do solo Ashava. But again, it's going to be on hardcore. I'm going to be level 20. It's going to be quite easy to die. So let's see how that will go. In any case, I wish you guys good luck. Have fun in the weekend. I'm going to be streaming, so stop by if you want to. And see you guys next time.